to another Centennial Tidbit, where over the past few months we've been talking with various individuals and organizations that have had some sort of tie with the centennial of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in 2021 and how they can help outreach and get communities involved. And today I'm having the unique pleasure of talking with Master Sergeant Retired Jari Villanueva of the United States Air Force. And he has a very interesting organization called TAPS for Veterans, and a unique insight into each of the buglers that played during the internment ceremonies for the unknown soldiers in 1921, 1958, and 1984. So I would like to welcome Jari, because that's going to be a lot easier than saying your last name.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I spent 23 years with the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. And of course, part of my duties was to do ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery. And I had the honor of sounding taps at the tomb on several occasions as part of a full honor wreath ceremonies that was hosted by the United States Air Force. So I have a great strong affinity with Arlington National Cemetery and the tomb in particular, having been there almost every single day during my 23 years. My organization, since I've retired, the organization I'm involved with is called TAPS for Veterans. And TAPS for Veterans is a nationwide organization that helps provide buglers to sound taps at military veterans funerals. There has been a need for live bugling for the longest time. Of course, you go to almost any military funeral now outside of the Washington area, and most of those you'll have a recording of taps rather than a live player. So we're hoping to get as many live buglers involved with those funerals as possible. TAPS for Veterans also does a number of programs around Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Independence Day, where we will assemble buglers from all over the country to sound taps in their hometown. And last year on Memorial Day, we did our Taps Across America, where we had 10,000 participants who played taps all over the country. CBS got involved with this. The On the Road with Steve Hartman was very kind and promoted our thing, and it went over very well, and we're planning to do it again. We were also involved with doing special programs like for the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. We also did several programs at Arlington National Cemetery. The first one was to commemorate the 150th anniversary of TAPS back in 2012. And then at Arlington, we were involved with the 50th anniversary of the funeral for President John F. Kennedy. And that, of course, was very important. Both involved buglers for that. And so this year, we're really looking forward to being involved not only with the 100 Nights of Taps in Gettysburg, but also supporting the centennial of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And what we have planned for that is being involved with special programs leading up to the centennial, which takes place on November 11th. The weekend before, we're hoping to do a big ceremony. The location is yet to be determined. And then, of course, on the actual day itself, the 11th at 11 p.m., we plan to have buglers all over the country to sound taps right at 11 o'clock as part of that special moment of remembrance for the unknown soldier.
Outstanding. Well, quite the accomplishments there. And I know that you and I have worked together for the National Salute, and you were able to do some special things for that this year. And we look forward to that continued relationship between our two organizations. Let's talk about 1921. And the picture that you have behind you obviously wasn't taken at 1921, but it was taken a little bit later. There's a gentleman in the middle and he's got a bugle. So why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, the bugler in this photo is Frank Witchey. and he was the bugler, the headquarters bugler for the 3rd United States Cavalry Regiment that was stationed at Arlington, or actually stationed at Fort Myer at that time when the unknown was buried. And the 3rd, of course, the 3rd Cavalry became the ceremonial troops supporting the tomb after it was put in. He was quite the bugler of the times, and he was known for his bugling skills. He actually enlisted in the Army in 1908. He was 16 at the time, but he lied, of course. And of course, at that time, the Army allowed boys under the age of 18 to enlist as musicians. So he enlisted as a bugler, and he actually went overseas with the cavalry unit during World War I. When they came back after the war, he was at Fort Myer and sounded all the calls. And of course, at that time, bugle calls regulated the daily life of soldiers. Everything from reveille in the morning to drill calls to being summoned to eat, mess call, drill calls, assembly calls. Then in the afternoon, of course, there'd be recall. There'd be evening calls of the tattoo, call to quarters, and then, of course, in the evening, taps, which would be sounded. Now, how he got chosen to be the bugler for the unknown is I'm not sure. From what I've heard, talking to a historian at the Library of Congress, is that General Pershing may have picked him especially to sound taps for this event. Pershing, of course, as we know, had quite a hand in the ceremony, choosing the body bearers who were to carry the casket and overseeing the ceremony. So I wouldn't have put it past Pershing to have chosen a bugler for this. So Frank Witchey was probably the one that was chosen to do this special duty. Witchey, of course, played on that day in November 1921, and he actually becomes a superstar after that. He winds up not only after sounding taps for the Tomb of the Unknowns, the interment, he also goes on to sound taps for President Woodrow Wilson, Lieutenant General Nelson Miles, General Wood, William Jennings Bryan, and he also sounded the taps for Calvin Coolidge Jr., the son of the President Coolidge. And there's also some newspaper articles I found that state that Witchey was also the bugler who sounded taps for Presidents Taft and Harding. I'm not sure about Harding for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Witchey is the one who sounded taps for President Taft, since he was buried at Arlington. And like I said, he became somewhat of a celebrity. He is mentioned in numerous articles, newspaper articles during the 1920s, and most of these articles refer to him as being the most famous bugler of the United States Army. And during the 20s and 30s, up until his retirement in 1938, he winds up sounding taps hundreds of times at the tomb for all different types of ceremonies. The picture behind me, I'm not sure when that was taken, but certainly was one of the many that the military held. Gold Star Mothers would have their special ceremonies, and he would always play for that. Winds up, like I say, playing for a lot, but then when the Army Band becomes organized in 1922, they start supporting a lot of the funerals. And so Frank shares a lot of those duties with the Army Band buglers. Now, he retires from the Army in 1938 at the rank of Staff Sergeant. Interestingly enough, his grave lists him as a technical sergeant, but the paperwork I've seen lists him as Staff Sergeant. And one of his comrades in the third Cavalry at the time said at his retirement that he was the best at blowing taps. He said not many people were dry-eyed when he got through. And another trooper had remembered that he could sound boots and saddles in such a way to get even the most greenest recruits off at a dead run. So he was quite a character, quite well known. And actually, when he retired, the commander at that time at Fort Myer was Colonel Wainwright, who becomes a general during World War II. And he actually writes a nice retirement certificate for Witchey, calling him, a soldier typical of the finest traditions of the service. And him having a record of which to be proud, and has been marked by commendations not only from his superiors but by the many patriotic organizations throughout the United States. So it was kind of nice to get that kind of nice attaboy from Colonel Wainwright on his retirement from the Army. So after his retirement, he still remains quite a celebrity. He actually appears on a radio program, the Rudy Valley National Radio Show. And Valley asks him about his career and actually asks him to sound some
The Royal Desserts Hour, directed by Rudy Valley. A news item from the New York Herald Tribune of June 2nd last, filed for future reference, brings us now an opportunity to observe, a bit in advance, the glorious 4th. The headline reads, Unknown Soldier's Bugler ends 30-year career. Sergeant Witchey retired from Army. Blue taps at graves of Wilson, Taft, and scores of other notables. Sergeant Witchey is with us this evening, arrayed in the historic dress uniform of the 3rd Cavalry, Old and Honored Regiment. Since his retirement, he has been named National Trumpeter of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Staff Sergeant Frank Witchey, 3rd U.S. Cavalry retired, 10 paces forward, please.
Sergeant Witchey, sir, reporting for microphone detail.
At ease, Sergeant. My compliments on your handsome appearance. You must have been very young when you enlisted. You hardly look old enough to be retired.
I was 16 when I enlisted, Mr. Valley.
I thought that 18 was the minimum enlistment age.
It was, but the recruiting officer didn't ask for my birth certificate.
I see. Your Army career must have included service in France,
Yes,
Sergeant.
Sir. It did. The 3rd Cavalry spent 23 months overseas. Some of us were at Chateau Ferry and a number of other uncomfortable spots.
Were you wounded?
Slightly, yes.
Who won the war, Sergeant?
The Marines, of course. Everybody knows that.
Do I detect a note of sarcasm in the sergeant's voice?
Yes, sir, you do. Not that anybody wants to take away from what the Marines did. They deserve all the glory they get. But there were a few dismounted horse soldiers around there, too.
You ought to know, Sergeant. I understand that modern warfare finds little use for mounted troops.
That's right. Machine gun fires, turtle things, 2 horses.
Yes, it's hardly civilized to treat horses that way. Is the 3rd Cavalry mechanized nowadays?
Partly, yes.
I imagine you old-time cavalrymen don't particularly care for mechanization.
That's right. And you can hardly blame us for preferring a fine horse to a stinking gasoline engine.
Do you think that cavalry will be entirely supplanted by mechanized troops?
No. Horses will always be useful. They don't run out of gas.
Sergeant, our purpose in bringing you up from Fort Myer was largely musical. I think a lot of former soldiers would like to hear a few bugle calls without the necessity of doing anything about the implied command. Let's run through part of a day in the life of a bugler. Might we have the first call, please? That's the one that wakes you up. And as a one-time, somewhat less than able seaman, I know you never want to get up. But then you hear this. And out we roll, cursing feebly. By the way, Sergeant, who does wake up the bugler?
The corporal of the guard on the night's last guard relief.
May all his children suffer from insomnia. Well, the next call is much more welcome. Soupy, 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 without a single bean. Coffee, 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 the worst you've ever seen. And next we hear... The orders for the day, we'll suppose, include one of those movie-tone news cavalry drills we see so often, usually in the snow at Fort Ethan Allen. The bugler blows. Boots and saddles. And then, with the cameraman carefully placed in a pit so that he can catch the horses thundering overhead, we hear attack. But sometimes it isn't for the news cameras. Sometimes it's real, desperately real. And later the bugler plays another call for men who cannot hear the notes. Let us hope it never need be real again. But let us remember, too, why so many men have died. I recall a line from a play once performed in this program, Maxwell Anderson's Valley Forge. In the play, the author has George Washington say, "This liberty will look easy by and by, when men no longer die to get it." In these days, when the idea and value of human liberty is denied with a sneer in so many lands, it is well to remember that liberty is not an easy thing to have and hold. For the men who died to get it, in the quiet belief that they did not die in vain. Thank you, Sergeant Witchey.